Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again. So guys, I apologise in advance. My internet has been going absolutely insane. I don't know what's wrong with it. It keeps jumping out, back in, and it's not good when you're trying to do a recording. Anyway guys, so today we're going to be talking about the escalations in the Middle East. We're going to be talking about the ridiculous escalations in Ukraine, and I guess you can put Russia in that category now. We're also going to talk about some things close to home that kind of, the first thing closer to home. Let me just read this now, guys. If you live in the United Kingdom, where are we? So, when I'm looking at things and how government policy is going to move forwards and how the people are going to react, always look at the money. Always look at what people are spending their money on. Always look at employment, because, in fact, I've got it upstairs. So there's lots of books written about this, but basically, when people have got no jobs, when people have got no money, when people have got no hope, that's when civil unrest happens. It's just a cauldron for civil unrest. So there was an article today, and I'll put this in the description. Rise in number of firms going bust, Insolvency Service says. Company insolvency levels remain much higher than those seen during both I don't know if we're allowed to say it, there's something 19 pandemic and the years following the 2008-2009 financial crisis, officials say. So what we've got at the moment is lots of smaller companies going bust. Now, the number of firms in England and Wales going bust last month rose by 16% year on year. So that means that the year before it was 16%, and then obviously, another 16%. Commentators said that 2,191 company insolvencies in July, wow, I thought that was for the year, in July showed how many businesses were still recovering from the impact of high inflation and borrowing costs, despite growing optimism about the UK economic outlook. So, it's really easy for people to look at the FTSE 100 companies in the United Kingdom and think, oh, you know what, we're doing well. But the reality is, these smaller companies, if you're in America, mom and pop businesses, these are the ones that employ, vast amounts of people, people who want part-time work, people who want work local, people who want work so they can look after their children. And once you see these businesses go bust in the numbers that we've got going bust at the moment, what are all these people going to do? Because, that has a knock-on effect, and I don't mean to, go below anybody, or, I want to really simplify this. So basically, you get the people who would work locally at a mum and pop business that's gone bust now. They would then spend money in their local shop. That local shop would then buy goods. They'd be able to buy more goods because they were getting more stuff coming in. They'd get paid, everybody would get paid, and that's how the economy works. Now these businesses are going bust. Those people who used to work for them, they don't have that money then to go and spend at those shops. So where do they get that money from? It just all adds to this cauldron of chaos. And then that shop goes bust because it relied on this one. I think I watched a documentary, and it showed you in 2020 how Boeing during the crisis, Boeing stopped. There was no flight, so Boeing stopped. They let off a load of their engineers. Now, downstream from that, it showed you how the engineers that worked there and the officers that supported them, the people who ate there, all this sort of stuff. It has infrastructure, and it has an ecosystem, and it shows you right down the chain. And because Boeing went bust, all the way down it, a local sandwich shop went bust. Then the bread company went bust because they weren't buying some bread for the sandwiches. Guys, and it was just absolutely wild. So these ecosystems, these financial ecosystems locally that are really important to our communities, these things are just disappearing under our, literally under our noses. And these people are obviously going to have to, I'd say a lot of them, if there's no work in that town, they have to go onto welfare or state benefits, whatever you guys call it, wherever you are in the world, And then Once that happens, that's the recipe then for mass civil unrest. Because when people have got nothing to lose, why wouldn't you go out and, do whatever? And that's what you find, because you get people who are scared of losing their jobs, scared of being, something happening at work. Once you take that away from them, what's left? So that's the situation in the UK at the moment, and these things are not going to get any better. We've got draconian laws imposed on us. People are losing their jobs. It's just getting from bad to worse in the United Kingdom. Now, of course, people will say the economy's grown 0.6%. What does that even mean? Does that mean that the top three arms companies have made a ton of money and they're offsetting everything else? That's probably what the reality is if you look at this. If you look at the information. But I can tell you 100% from going on the high street, shops are closing, local businesses are closing, and people are becoming unemployed. At a rate that I've never seen before, and that's what I'm seeing with my own eyes in the UK. So nobody can argue with that. Anyway, so we've done Iran. So when we talk about this conflict in Ukraine and and Eastern Europe and Russia, that whole area it's an absolute hotbed at the moment. Now, initially, when the Ukrainians pushed into Russia, I think that I think the Ukrainians were as surprised as anyone that actually happened. You can see some of the reports on on social media, and they thought, look, this is a one-way mission. But they actually managed to push, they actually managed to take a lot of ground. But I think everybody needs to be realistic about how much ground the Ukrainians have actually taken. They've not taken that much ground. The Russian war machine is now heavily bombarding them. I was under the illusion that Putin would try and not bomb his own towns and not bomb his own cities, but no, he just went straight away and did that. So now you've got this front, and I think the Ukrainians don't know what to do with that situation. I think that they're thinking, right, if we push forwards, we're going to overextend ourselves and then we might get cut off. If we stay here, we're sitting ducks. If we retreat, then obviously we're retreating. So it's a really difficult situation for the Ukrainians at the moment what to do. That said, in the, I'll read you the articles, guys, because in other regions in Ukraine, there's been huge gains by the Russians. So I'll just read you this and I'll put the link in the description. Ukraine orders evacuation of city as Russia gains. Ukrainian authorities have ordered the evacuation of a key city in the Donbass region as Russian forces continue to make gains in the east of the country, despite Ukraine's ongoing offensive in Russia's Kursk region. Officials said families with children living in, I always butcher this, guys, Pokrovsk and surrounding villages would be forced to leave. So you've got the Ukrainians now evacuating, towns and cities in and around that whole eastern flank, and then the Ukrainians are pushing in this tiny little place just west of Sumny, east of Sumny, sorry. The head of the city's military government, Sergei Dobrog, said residents had at most 2 weeks to flee the Russian advance. So they're telling us there, guys, that the Russians are going to have they think that the Russians are going to have overrun that city within 2 weeks. Now, it's very difficult for people to look at this situation with Eastern eyes, I guess, because we all look at these wars and we think about them, and we think about our military and how our military conduct operations, and the Western military and the Russian military are totally different. The Russian military will just it's just got a stranglehold on Ukraine at the moment, and it really is, guys. It's slowly sucking. What you've seen the Ukrainians running out of weapons. They're asking to use, in particular, British weapons further inland of Russia. I don't think it's going to have any lasting effect. They need game-changing technology, and they need game-changing munitions. Now, I don't think being able to fire a Storm Shadow is going to have much of an effect because of the cost of those Storm Shadows. What are they going to do once all, X amount of them are gone? Because once they start letting them use them in Ukraine, they will be gone so quick. They'll just get fired and fired and fired. A lot of them will miss. A lot of them will be shot out of the sky. I mean, I think these things are like over £1 million each. I'm not sure. Are they? Yeah, I think they're over £1 million each. So the Storm Shadow and the, what's it called, the French one, the Scalp, they're more or less the same missile. So once all these expensive munitions are gone, then what? The Russians will keep pushing. You've got to look at the size of Russia. It is absolutely huge. They have manpower, they have resources, you know, they don't have the best technology, they don't have a very, you know, they don't pay their soldiers well, but, you know, they're able to push and keep pushing and just keep starving off resources, and little by little they're grinding the Ukrainians down. And this is why I think that the, you know, NATO troops into Ukraine at some point, it's inevitable. What we could see very soon is, you know, the Ukrainians try and make some more ground into Russia, and then at some point, I think it will be the British, guys. You know, I'm gonna stick my neck out. I think it'll be the British who will be the first ones to open these weapon systems up. Now, it's already been, you know, as I understand it, it's already had the green light from the Brits, but for some reason, and I don't understand this policy, because you know, as a British taxpayer, I think that Britain should have sovereignty over who they give their stuff to. You know, we shouldn't be able to, you know, we shouldn't have to wait for America to say, oh yes, you can give your stuff to someone. You know, I have no idea how that works. But the reality is, Britain have greenlit this, you know, this procedure, or the way forwards for Ukrainians to use British weapons deep inside Russia. The Americans, for some reason, have put some blocks or bureaucracy in the way, and all this time, you know, you're getting people on both sides now, and there's a war happening. I'm skeptical on how much actual benefit this would be, being able to use Storm Shadows, because I don't think that they have enough capacity. You know, you really do need a game-changing technology, or you need some game-changing moves, and by game-changing I mean NATO troops moving into Ukraine, and that's the only way I feel at this point that Ukraine has a chance of survival. The NATO forces, it would be an expeditionary force, it would be a peacekeeping force, it could be whatever banners. They wouldn't be involved in the fighting. What they'd do is they would move in from the west right up to the Dnipro and cover the northern corridor, and then that would relieve all the Ukrainian troops to go then push to the east. Obviously that's how it'd start. Then you'd get mission creep, then you'd get small amounts of troops going with the Ukrainians, then you get larger amounts, and that's how things would happen. Because beyond no illusion, the Russians, and think of this now from the Russians' point of view, the Russians understand that they're at war with NATO. Now, in yesterday's video, when I talked about Iran, and I gave the, the tactical dilemma of, okay, this conflict's inevitable. If people think this conflict in the Middle East is inevitable, if America thinks this conflict in the Middle East is inevitable, they've got two choices. They can wait until more and more arms go into Iran, more and more weapons go into Iran, more and more Russian scientists go to Iran, Iran finally gets a nuclear weapon, Iran tests a nuclear weapon, Iran's a nuclear armed state. They can wait until that happens, or they can think, right, okay, this is inevitable, this conflict's inevitable, we can either wait for Iran to be a nuclear armed state and then attack it, or we can attack it now while it's not a nuclear armed state, you know, and it makes more sense to attack now while it's not a nuclear armed state than obviously attacking when it is a nuclear armed state and risking nuclear Armageddon. So you kind of have the same, you know, the same mentality can then be transferred to Ukraine, and you can think, okay, Ukraine's pushing, Russia's pushing, what are we going to do with this situation? How are we going to make it work? Well, who would we be talking about now? We'd be talking about NATO. If NATO have said, right, okay, we are going to support Ukraine regardless, if they know that the Ukrainians are going to falter, it makes more sense to push NATO troops into Ukraine now and minimise the losses of the Ukrainians, so they've got more of a fighting chance to push forwards into Russia. But guys, you know, be under no illusion, this really is nothing. We don't go back to the normalcy of the way we were. Look at things from the Russian side of it now. You know, the Russians also know the counter argument to that, that the Ukrainians, that NATO, they're all at full capacity. So for the Russians, why would they stop either? You know, as far as Russia's concerned, they know now that Ukraine will push into their ground. They know now that Ukraine has the capacity to take more towns, to take more cities. So Russia has to keep going. You know, I don't see, apart from, guys, I'll be honest with you, apart from aliens landing and giving us all some free energy machine, I really don't see a way that either of these two conflicts can back down. I just see them escalating and escalating. And the problem with these escalations is, the longer these escalations are at a low level, the more of the heavy weapons are getting built up. So Russia, for example, now, excuse me, you know, behind the scenes, these guys, they'll be testing their weapons, they'll be, you know, making, you know, the military industrial complex will be on full capacity. They'll be producing more and more and more things will be produced upstream and downstream. People becoming more efficient at producing these goods. And then the longer this goes on, the more efficient that war machine is. So the harder it is and the more brutal the war will be. And that's the reality of these situations, guys. The longer they're led, the longer they're left simmering, the worse they're going to be. It's kind of like the situation, it's kind of like on the macro of what you've got on the micro in the United Kingdom. You know, you've got this simmering pot, and I've actually noticed now a few people have started to, you know, a few commentators have started to mention about the simmering pot. You know, when you've got this simmering pot, you bolt the lid on, it's still a simmering pot. At some point, that is going to just go. And the harder you clamp that lid on, the further it's going to go. And, you know, look what we've seen over the last couple of months. Look what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. It's absolutely wild. And, you know, I really feel we're heading into like an Orwellian totalitarian state. But then we need to, you know, what's the argument? What version of totalitarianism are we going for? I would prefer some sort of cyberpunk, you know, altered carbon state, but, you know, that's just me. Anyway, guys, I have waffled on far too long. I've got some DIY to do. You know that DIY that you need to do when it's like, you put it off in the summer, you're like, oh, I'll do it mañana, mañana, mañana. And you keep putting these things off until now. I've got like a balcony that I need to waterproof. I've got fiberglassing I need to do on the roof, and I've got to seal in a massive bay window. Well, I say massive. I've got to seal in a bay window, well, not a bay window, I've got to seal in a window overlooking my balcony, because when the rain comes, water gets in from somehow, but, you know, I don't know, guys. Anyway, I'm going to mag to grid, guys. I'm going to see you later. Look at the links in the description, and I'll speak to you later.